Hey, so in this lecture, I want to introduce the raw string literal, and for this to get started, I have string 1 and string 2 both of type standard string, and then I also have a C string. Now for the first string, string 1, you can see I have, if I just scroll here, I have a to-do list for each one of these, but for the string 1, I have to use the new line characters here to separate out the to-do list on every new line. So let me build and run this. I just want to show you what we get. Okay, this is basically what I want to do, to-do list. Then I have a bunch of things on the to-do list, and then I have the end of to-do list. Okay, and then I go and print it out again. So each item I have to go and use the new line character. Now, of course, in some cases that can be handy. So at this point we are familiar with those escape sequences, but as we've seen in some cases, it can get a bit annoying. Let's say we want a backslash, then you have to do one backslash followed by another one and so forth. So what we have is we have the raw string literal to solve this issue, and you can see it starts with an R. Okay, so I'm using this right here to initialize string 2, which is of type standard string. This is basically the syntax. You have an R, capital R here, the double quote and the opening parentheses, and then I have the string within that I actually want to initialize string 2 with. Alright, and then that is going to end off with the closing parentheses and the closing double quote. And basically we will get the same thing here that we got with the string 1, and we can also initialize the C string using the string literal, raw string literal as well. You can see down here I'm simply printing out string 1 and string 2, but what happens and what's going to be the difference between, let's say, string 2 and the C string? Well, let me go and print it out. So I'll print out the C string, print out string 2, and then we print out C string. And what we'll see is, actually also notice my formatting. You can see that I don't do tabs here. I have R for the raw string literal, the double quote again, the opening parentheses, and then I have to-do list. But down here, I'm going to do R, the double quote, the opening parentheses, and then I have a enter. Okay, I pressed return here. Then I have to-do list. Then I have enter, following that again, wake up, and so on. If I build around that, you will notice the difference. We actually get a new line printed out here, which we did not have before. For example, if I, now it's the same as up here, that is for the C string is the same as the string 2 now. If I build a run, we will not get the new line. I'll just undo that actually, and then maybe I'll add a tab for play games. Simply pressing tab, indenting that. Notice I'm not having to use the tab escape sequence as I would have to do with the string 1. And you can see we get a tab. And that is basically what the raw string literal gives us. The compiler will basically handle the formatting for us, and we're no longer concerned with having to use the escape sequences. In fact, what I can do is I can use the escape sequence in here. I'll add 2 backslashes over here as well. Build a run, and you'll see that those actually show up in here now. Backslash new line, and it doesn't actually give us a new line. Now, if you think about it for a second, what if you want to use the double quotes and the parentheses within the raw string literal? Then of course we'll have errors. For example, let's say here where we want to study for the exam. If you have double quotes, that should be fine. You can build around that. See, we get those double quotes. But what if I want to? I will do something like this, and you will notice that this will give me an error because we have the same syntax. So that is going to be a bit confusing to the compiler. We'll get an error, and so we'll have to fix that, and we can fix that by using what is called a delimiter. You can maybe use dashes or underscores or a underscore over there, and then also I'll add one down here maybe. Okay, so that is outside of these opening and closing parentheses and between the double quotes. The delimiter can be a sequence of one or more characters, except the parentheses, the backslash, and the space. The starting, or that is the initial delimiter, is going to be the same as the terminating delimiter. And if I build a run now, that will now work. You can see that the opening and closing double quotes and parentheses work just fine. And of course, that doesn't have to be an underscore. That can be something else like Bob, for example. And that we can build a run, and that will work fine, as we can see. So that is one way of solving that issue. But of course, the chances of you doing this is slim, but I just wanted to show you the issue that you can run into with this. In this next example, I have string 1 initialized to this right here, and you can see that I use the escape sequences to get a backslash in there. I have a path basically where I have this to-do list, which is a text file.txt. Okay, that is in the documents folder under the Bob user, okay, and on the C drive. And then for string 2, I'm going to initialize that instead using a raw string literal. So you can see that I have the string as is without using the escape sequences. And then I go and print out string 1 and string 2. And if I build a run, you can see both of those printouts are the same. So this is just another example of where the raw string literal comes in handy, because we don't have to do all of those backslashes. And of course, the same is true if you want to do a double quote. For example, if you want to add a double quote, you'd have to do the backslash with a double quote like that. Okay, so if you want that string between, or that path between double quotes for some reason, whereas down here we don't have to do it in that way, we can simply use the double quotes within that string, as long as it is between the initializing and terminating sections of that raw string literal as discussed. Pull the run here. Again, we get the double quotes. And so again, just demonstrating where the raw string is handy, we don't have to worry about the escape sequences. It's a good idea to check the documentation on this. It can be a bit confusing at first, but now that I've discussed it, you should be able to follow along with this. So I have the documentation open on CPP reference, language, string and literal, and you can see we have the regular is-char sequence, which is a sequence of one or more chars, a basic char, an escape sequence, and so on. And this is what we've discussed down here. This was introduced in C++11, so since C++11, and you actually also have a prefix that I did not cover, and that is basically, you can see right here, that is L, U8, U, and U, and those are the same as you can see in these examples, which we've also not discussed at this point. And those basically have to do, down here we can see the numbers here to the right, and then you can see down here brief explanations on those. So in this case, you can see with number 2 here, where we have the L, that is a wide string literal, whereas 1 is an ordinary string literal. You can see we don't have a prefix with that. That is an ordinary string literal. I might come back to this in a future lecture where I discuss some of the other things in a bit more detail, such as the wide string literal, for example. But with the raw string literal, that is the 6th one here, as I explained, anything between the delimiters will become part of the string. And you can also notice what the string is. So here the R string sequence is explained down here, and then also the D char sequence, which is basically the delimiter, right? That is explained here as well. The sequence of one or more D chars, then you have to check what is D char. That is basically a basic character, and then accept the parentheses, backslash, and spaces. So as I explained in the lecture, but I just want to show you more or less how the documentation is here, and that we have more than what we have discussed so far. But I hope this gives you a basic idea on the raw string literal and where that will come in handy. This is a great reference on string literals, and we might come back to this again in a future lecture.